Hello and welcome to the Dream It, Plan It, Live It training. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carl Lehman. I'm joined by my eldest son, Harry, and we're going to walk you through some of the principles and concepts that we've been working on and developed over the last 3 or 4 decades. So you might have come across us through either the podcast. Both Harry and I host the Dream It, Plan It, Live It podcast. Or maybe you've been to speaking events that we've spoken at, or maybe you've just seen our social media. But if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, I've got no idea how much money is enough to be financially free, or I don't know what I'm going to do in retirement, or what my family would do if I kick the buckets, then do you know what? You're absolutely in the right place. But first of all, why should you listen to us? Well, I'll give you a little bit of a background of a story. It's a little bit of a confession, to be honest with you. I worked in the financial services profession for a number of years, and then I found myself to be a little bit of a fraud. Now, let me just be crystal clear on this. This is not like a banged up in prison financial crime type of fraud, but a fraud as in terms of not being completely congruent to myself and my values. And the good news is here is that I'm now an advocate of what I call proper financial life planning. And that's very different from what I used to do, which is all about product advice. Because the way the financial services industry works is this: you've got big companies who manufacture products and then they distribute those products through what I call financial advertisers. Now, you might think I've misread the word there or pronounced it, it should be financial advisors, but I'd have you consider the possibility that it's actually financial advertisers, because these people, and I used to do it, then roll this thing out to their clients and sell it as the next best thing, the latest fad, the latest fashion. And you know what? It doesn't really get to the heart of what is really important to people. And I spent 20 years as an independent financial advisor, or as I call them, independent financial advertiser, doing the same thing as other IFAs do. And you know what that was? Harry, I'll bring you in here. What was that?
Peddling products, wasn't it? Pushing products.
Selling products. Absolutely right, my friend. So a proper financial life plan. Tell people about that, how that works.
Well, it's about understanding everything about you. It's not just about looking at the finances or the money. It's about the bigger picture, isn't it, here?
Mhm.
When we're talking about a financial life plan. Financial is only one of the words in that whole kind of sentence, and it's important to understand what your hopes, what your dreams are, and it would be good to live those, yet not having the fear or the anxiety of running out of money, i.e., feeling safe and secure in living the life that you ultimately want for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is about this, when I was working as a financial advertiser, it wasn't really sort of getting, my values. It wasn't really triggering me in a good way, and I almost quit the profession as a result. But out of that was born a new way of working, which we call the Dream It, Plan It, Live It system. It's where we use your financial life plan to design the life that you want. And if you look in the bottom right hand part of this graphic here, it can mean different things to different people, right, Harry?
Yep, absolutely. It's not a one size fits all approach like maybe financial advertisers take when they're peddling those products, trying to sheep dip everyone through the same process. This is about understanding what makes you tick, what's important to you, what your values are. As you say, every person is different in what that looks like to them.
Yeah, so I think over the years, for me, I've been doing this for over 40 years now. It's one of those things for some people, it can be about leaving a legacy to those that they love and care about, or maybe charitable concerns that they're particularly passionate about, or it could be about liberating them to go and do all the things that they want to do, or it could be just simply as much as giving people peace of mind. I wrote a book about it back in 2015. It became a number 1 bestseller, which I was absolutely astonished about. And then following the COVID years, I then wrote a follow-up book called Money, Mind, Meaning, which then looks at the way our mind works and behavioral science and the latest teachings in that regard. And in November 2022, that also became a #1 best-selling book on Amazon, which is just absolutely bonkers, really. But what we're all about is helping you to better manage your money. And it's all about knowing exactly how to ultimately dream, plan, and live the exact life that you want, yet without having to win the lottery in order to be able to achieve it. So let's give you some little tips and techniques that will help you to get your financial life plan kicked off in the right direction. So secret #1, Harry, I'm going to get you to go through this, is all about pensions making for poor people. You might think, what on
Mhm.
earth? Why would financial advisors or financial coaches or these people who specialize in this sort of thing say that pensions make for poor people? Talk us through this.
It's a very abrupt statement, isn't it, to start off with from a couple of financial planners, but it is certainly true. Um, let's start with ISAs, right? I think most people know what ISA stands for. Most people will come back and say individual savings account, wouldn't they? Agreed?
Yep.
Is that what they actually stand for, though? Because I personally am not entirely sure that is the case, because I'm more of the opinion that idiots save aimlessly.
Yeah.
ISAs, idiots save aimlessly. Now, it's not saying ISAs are tools used by said people, but it's understanding that we need to start with the end in mind.
Hmm.
Um, it's all well and good chucking some money into a pension, into an ISA on a regular basis and kind of forgetting about it. But is that really going to get you where you need to get? The answer is probably going to be no.
Hmm.
And also, if you don't even know what you're aiming for, how do you know when you've got there? How do you know when you've achieved what you want to achieve? And I think that's the really important point, is you'll get that endorphin hit when you're kind of starting off, you're paying in, you're going, oh, great, I'm saving for my financial future. I'm looking after future me. So in 10 years' time, 30 years' time, I'm going to be all good. But that kind of novelty, that endorphin hit will quickly wear off if you do not know what you're aiming for, because you're doing this month in, month out, month in, month out. You're feeling the strain a little bit as the money's going out of the account, being put elsewhere. You're not using it. You might get a bit fed up. Might get a bit fed up of doing the same thing and going, what's the meaning in all of this? There isn't really anything. So that's why pensions do make for poor people and ISAs are idiots save aimlessly. It's about starting with the end in mind.
I think the thing to add a little extra on top of that is that when most people, most of the time, are meeting with financial advertisers, they'll say, how much money have you got to put away?
Hmm.
What budget have you got available to invest each month? And the conversation will circle around, well, do you put money into ISAs or do you put pensions? And there's that kind of whole dilemma, isn't it? Do you go this way or that? But as you've just said there, Harry, it's a bigger conversation than that. And as we've just uncovered here, everybody now knows what ISA stands for, is that idiots do save aimlessly. But the question I always put to people is this, is how many people have a plan for when they're dead? By that, I mean they've taken professional advice, they've spoken to people that they love and care about, they've given it some serious thought and consideration, and they've got this clearly written down plan of what they want to happen when they're dead. It's called a last will and testament. Now, a lot of people have got a last will and testament jotted down, so they've got a plan for when they're dead. But those same people, if you would then say to them, well, how many of you got a plan for when you're alive? And the chances are that most people don't. And that's where you're talking about, most people aim at nothing and hit it with tremendous accuracy. So, as you said, start with the end in mind. But by doing that, you have to have some kind of dreams. So, got a nice
Hmm.
cat there and sound asleep, having some dreams. So, what's the best way to achieve this? Well, it's to kind of do a bucket list. So, talk us through Stephen Sutton and this bucket list here that was created.
Yeah, so Stephen Sutton, for those that don't know, was a teenager probably about 10 years ago now, wasn't it? The Stephen, a little bit over that probably,
Wasn't that?
some
Yep.
10, 15 years ago. Young guy diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he wanted to make the most of the rest of his life
Hmm.
that he had left, whilst also doing it for good causes, so raising money for charity. Anyway, he sat down and he thought long and hard about the kind of things that he wanted to do before his time was ultimately up. And there we go. We got that in front of us in terms of these are some of the things that were important to him. So do some public speaking, which I know, Dad, obviously you helped him with, get a tattoo, fly first class, all these different things that I'd love to do that, but I don't have the time or whatever. That's not possible, blah, blah, blah. Stephen sat down, wrote this bucket list, blue sky thinking, and went, how can I make this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And for people that have never done this before, it's worth watching the film Bucket List with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson in. And it's quite a poignant story if ever you lost any loved ones to cancer, because that's how the story starts. But it ends up being quite a dark comedy, and it really is funny. But the first 20 minutes can be a bit of a difficult watch if you lost anyone to cancer. But the sort of things that go in there is about this kind of bucket list. It helps get the message across, and on the screen are just some ideas of the sort of things that people might and I have seen written on people's like sort of bucket lists. And it can be financial, it can be travel, it can be personal development, it can be a myriad of different things. So how do you build it? Well, I always say find a format that works well for you. Personally, I think if you think in ink, it impresses it into the brain much better than using electronic notes. There's a connection with you writing pen on paper and how it impresses it into the brain. So thinking ink. So write down absolutely anything that you want to be, that you want to have, that you want to do in your life, and don't dismiss anything saying I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too fat, I'm too thin. Who sets the limits here on our thinking? This is about really letting your creativity go. Write down everything, because even those things that you think might be challenging, actually the brain's a pretty smart thing. It starts to compute different ways of being able to do things. Tell us about step two and carry on from here, Harry.
Yeah, so sharing it with others is a surefire way of increasing the odds of achieving what you want to achieve. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's like if you share it with whatever plan that you've got, if you've got a goal and you share it with someone that cares about you, you've got a 73, 74% better chance of achieving it than if you just keep it to yourself. It's about being held accountable, isn't it, ultimately, and going, okay, well, what are you going to be doing to get to that point? It's all very well and good writing that bucket list down, but it's being held accountable to go, not only how are you going to do it, but are those really the things that are important to you? I've never heard you mention that before, or give that a bit more thought or whatever. It's just kind of having that sense check that someone else there to push things along as well.
Hence your 9 o'clock meeting with me on a Monday morning.
Indeed.
Hold each other accountable. And then I guess once you've got your ideal sort of life jotted down on paper, the kind of finances need to be looked at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? We haven't talked about money at any point
Yeah,
up until now.
yeah. But it's at this point you do then need to kind of cost it out, work it out. How much money do you need in what we call your freedom fund, which will liberate you to kind of do all the things that you want to do. So just to kind of recap on summary of secret number one, idiots save aimlessly. Don't be an idiot. Be a wise man. Begin with the end in mind. It's that old Stephen Covey principle, isn't it, Harry? Of begin with the end in mind and create the bucket list. And if I can just quickly share a success story of a client that I worked with some years ago, Nikki Brown is the managing director of this company called PCE Limited. When I first met Nikki, he was in the first meeting just an astonishing guy. And I said, Nikki, I said, you are so switched on. Why on earth do you need me in your life? He said, Carl, he said, I'm really good at running my business. I've got a great board of directors around me. I'm really good at working the team, but I don't have the time to do all the things that sort of you and Harry do. And really, it's about that. I need to have strategic alliances around the table for the common good of me and my business. And this guy literally started on the shop floor as a labourer sweeping up when he told me his story. And he was managing director of the firm before the age of 30, if my memory serves me correct. And now they're doing an astonishing sort of turnover, and it's just a great thing to see. But it just goes to show you that smart people surround themselves with a good team around them. So let's get into secret number two.
Hmm.
It's
It's
not
not what
what you've
you
got.
got. Hmm. Yeah, it's not what you got, it's what you do with it that counts. Yeah. It's all about planning properly and leveraging what you've already got,
Hmm.
essentially, as well. So it's good looking at the bucket list and building that up and then costing it out. Chances are you've already been doing some work towards that for however many years already.
Hmm.
It's just we're starting to build the bigger picture around it and then ultimately understanding how we leverage what you've already got and what you can do in the future to achieve that.
But isn't it all about your net pay, though, Harry? You know, at the end of the day, over the years, I've spoken to a number of people who said to me, "It's all right for you, Carl. You're building a business. You could be financially free. Blah 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 blah. You know, I go to this job. They pay me a sum of money. I get this take home pay. Isn't it all about the net pay?"
Hmm. Well, I'd argue you don't need to win the lottery. You don't need a footballer's salary to go off and achieve what you want to achieve. It's about making smart financial decisions, whether they be small, whether they be large. It's about making small financial decisions and making things work hard for you.
Yeah,
And there are really easy ways of doing that,
yeah,
aren't there?
yeah. I'll quickly just jump in here and talk about Terry and June, not the real names, but these were clients of mine who, in their mid 50s, they were both school teachers, had relatively average incomes for a professional couple. But I was astonished because they had a home which had no mortgage. They had a little holiday home down in Cornwall which had no mortgage. They had, I mean, I'm going back some years ago, bearing in mind. So I'm recording this now with you in 2025, and this was like many, many years ago. But they both had £15,000 a year income as pensions, and they had £1 million in their ISAs. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, back in the day, you know, it wasn't usual for people to have £1 million in their ISAs. And I said, how on earth have you managed to achieve this? To which the gentleman said to me, he said, "You call yourself a financial advisor, Carl?" He said, "There's the door, get out." And I think he was like joking because I just kind of laughed in his face. And I said, with the greatest respect, I said, we've got clients that have got 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Even the odd one or two had 400,000 in their ISAs, but no one really had £1 million sat in essentially what was a tax-free fund. And I felt I was back at school because he just started asking me questions. He said, "So, Layman," he said, "what was it before ISAs?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, what was the tax favourable savings plan before ISAs?" I said, "Do you mean PEPs, personal equity plans?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "When did they start?" And I can remember this one because I started in 1985. And I was going, "Well, they started here." And he said, "And how much money could you put away into a PEP when they first started?" And I said, "I think it was £1,800 a year." And he said, "And that's what we used to do." He said, "But then what happened?" And I knew the answer to this one. And I said, "Well, it rose to £3,600 a year. I think you could put away." He said, "And then what did we do?" I said, "You put £3,600 a year away?" He said, "Absolutely. We learned to kind of pay ourselves first. We just had a discipline of putting this money aside." And then he said, "So what happened next, Layman?" I was like, flipping out. I really do feel like I'm back at school. And I was like sweating. Like he goes, "Come on, Tessas. I'll give you a clue." I said, "Oh yeah, Tessas. So how much money could you put away into a Tessa, Carl?" And I was like, £9,000. Well, we put £9,000 away if we could afford it every year, each and every year. And of course, these PEPs, these Tessas are all now rolled into ISAs, so that's where the money's all come from. But you know, they've got this money sat in a tax-free fund, which is essentially going to provide them with a tax-free income, or they can take tax-free withdrawals out. It is amazing. So it just goes to show that with average incomes and a little bit of discipline, you can do exceptional things. And it always reminds me of this Warren Buffett quote: "Do not save what is left after spending, spend what is left after saving," which is just brilliant. You know, I think, you know, how many of us actually sort of really do that? But you're a big advocate of this.
Knowing your magic number.
Yeah.
Mm, really important. You need to calculate your freedom fund. So again, just to recap, we've gone through the process, we've built that life plan, we know what's on the bucket list, we know what you want to achieve. We're starting to cost it out now. We're starting to calculate the freedom fund. Um, we've got a couple of things to consider here, haven't we, when it comes to the freedom fund, I believe.
You want me to click the slide, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
please.
We've got a bucket, Harry, is what
We have
we've
got a
got.
bucket. We love our buckets, don't we, over here? Now it's about understanding what is part of the Freedom Fund and what is not. Okay. So, what is part of it? Well, the answers are there in front of us. Money that's in the bank, building society, shares, ISAs. How does this get topped up? Well, salary, dividends, if you own shares or own your own business, equity, pension income, tax credits, all kind of income sources there that then start to feed the funnel that go into the Freedom Fund bucket.
Mhm.
Right? Anything else that we've missed? There you go, inheritance windfalls.
Yeah.
It's also just as important, isn't it, to know what is not in the Freedom Fund?
Okay.
I think a lot of confusion comes in here, and we will hear some of these things quite often. Um, people's houses, for example, the equity they've got in their house, they might go, well, that's my freedom fund. That's going to fund my retirement. We go, okay, well, go on, take a brick out your house and go and exchange it for some money at the bank then. You can't do it.
Yeah.
It's only when you release the equity through downsizing or moving to a cheaper property does that money then make up part of the freedom fund.
What about that?
Pension fund, interesting one, that isn't it?
Mhm.
Because you'd have thought that's the most aligned with the freedom fund. But again, pensions are great. As much as we said they're for poor people earlier, that's not the case. They're actually a fantastic tool to be using. Problem is, you can't always get access to them if you needed them before a certain age. So, therefore, do they make up part of the Freedom Fund? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the tax-free cash that you can release, that certainly will then fall into the bucket.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? If people want to retire in their 40s or early 50s,
Yeah,
your pension fund can't form part of that kind of
absolutely.
fund to kind of release you. Depending on legislation, that kind of keeps moving up. I mean, when I started out, you used to be able to access your personal pension from age 50,
Mhm.
and it did a lot of occupational pension schemes. They had retirement ages of 50. Then I've seen it move to 55 and 57, and it'll go on and on and on because people are living longer. But it's an important consideration. What about a business? Because a lot of people say,
Yeah.
my business is my pension, Harry.
Yeah, I've
Is it?
heard that one a few times before. It is and it isn't. It certainly isn't until it's sold.
Yeah,
Until you have that cold hard cash, that released equity in your bank account, that business is not your pension.
yeah.
And it's a real dangerous thing to tread here because history has shown us that business owners typically overestimate the value of their business quite considerably. So they might be sit there thinking it's worth 1 million, 2 million, and going, oh, that's great, I'll sell it and I'll retire off that, and then that'll be plenty for me. Fantastic news. Don't need to do any other planet. Only for either a couple of outcomes to happen. One, economically, something happens in the world, the business collapses,
Hmm.
value's gone. Or a business is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So what
Hmm.
happens if someone shows up and only offers you two, 300,000 for your business that you thought was worth a million or two?
Hmm.
You've left yourself a bit short there. So it is a real dangerous one to tread here. But yeah, once the business is sold and the equity is released, that money is then in your freedom fund.
Well, you only need to look back 5 years to kind of COVID
Yeah.
time when 2020 hit, how many businesses went to the wall. And if you were, a year or three away from retirement and that was part of your pot or all of your pot, then do you know what? Your retirement's going to be miserable. So I would always say it's the gin with the tonic, it's the butter with the bread. But like anything, you need a number of pieces of the jigsaw to actually sort of build that financial picture all together.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for an example. So this was a case that literally done. So that's why it's an odd number. Somebody said to me, I need £40,637 a year. That was their income requirement in retirement. They costed it out using our lifestyle calculator. And I said to them, well, look, in very simple terms, if you just take that amount of money and multiply it by 30, i.e., the life expectancy you're potentially going to have, then you need 1.2 million pounds sat in your pot. Or there's another way of working it out, which is where you say, right, okay, what happens if I live more than 30 years? What happens if medical science improves and I actually live more than 30 years? Or what happens if I want to leave this as a legacy fund? So we call this the kind of leaky bucket
Mhm.
way of working things out. So you take the same income, the £40,637 here, but if we assume, let's say, a 4% income yield, which at current market is a reasonable thing to expect. This is nothing more than a mathematical calculation, by the way. It's not advice. It's just showing you how you might want to start getting the mental juices going on this. Then if you take that and do the maths on it, you need just over £1 million. So either way, I think a lot of people a lot of the time underestimate how much money they're actually going to need. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, really. So just a point on those figures, it doesn't take into account any existing savings that you've got. The tax calculation is non-existent or crude. It doesn't take into account inflation. It's just to get your brain thinking. If you want to really know the truth about money and you really want to know what it means to you, then Harry's the person who's regulated and authorized to give that advice. So I would say reach out to him and he'll do the numbers for you. Just summarize this, Harry, for us.
Yeah, know your magic number. Know what that
Yeah.
freedom fund needs to be to facilitate that ideal life for you. Calculate the freedom fund. Have a holy proverbial fund as well. That's something that is really, really important. So that key point number three is an emergency fund, essentially, isn't it? It's around you. So your war chest that if the proverbial hits the fan, you've got some money around you just in case you need it.
Yeah, I mean, we did a podcast recently, didn't
Yeah.
we? An event we had for all of our clients, and we were interviewing a number of clients who were happy to be interviewed. It was really funny because they were reflecting back on me serving them for 20, 30 years in many cases, and what came out of that was like people saying Carl and his buckets, and it's true. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you're thinking to yourself, well, how do I start to get my financial ducks lined up in a row? It really doesn't have to be any more complicated than visualizing three buckets in front of you. So the bucket on the far left, that's the holy shit fund. Harry was too polite there, didn't use the S word, but I'm going to tell you. So the holy shit fund is there so that when the proverbial hits the fan, and it will at some point in your life, probably on more than one occasion, that's just the rich tapestry of life. You've got money that's there, it's secure, it's readily available, you can get your grubby little hands on it. Brilliant. It allows you to put your head on the pillow at night and sleep easy. The bucket on the far right is the one that's further out in terms of the time spectrum. So we can take different approaches with that, right? Because that's your freedom fund. That's the one that's really going to help you to be financially free at some point in the future. And the one that often gets mistaken or overlooked or not in place at all in most people's circumstances is that medium term bucket. So if you think of the holy shit fund as the short term bucket and then the freedom fund bucket as the longer term bucket, most people don't have what I call a medium term bucket. In other words, it can slide down on top of the holy crap fund if you need it, but equally if you don't need it, it can go up to the right hand column and it can be there for your future as well. But again, that's something that Harry would kind of go through with you, because you really need to make sure you got the right amount of money in the right place. Otherwise it can be a catastrophe from a financial planning point of view. Guilt-free spending. I love this one because I'm a bit at that age myself now where I'm easing back. As you know, Harry, within our family business, I'm on more kind of business development side of things and working with the team. And that means I've got a little bit more time to go out and ride my mountain bike, a little bit more time to go to the gym, and to pursue the kind of causes and things that are really kind of interest to me.
Yeah.
But there's a psychological shift that happens here. So let's talk about the lifestyle taps.
Okay. Okay. It's understanding what they're going to look like and also what the different taps actually might be between now and forever,
Yeah.
really. So you can quite clearly see there, current lifestyle, that's as you are living today. What's lifestyle costing you? At some point in the future, that tap's going to get turned off because life is going to change. You're going to take retirement, or the way that you live is going to change. And that tap is going to get bigger, get smaller. Something's going to happen to it. Likelihood is it might get a little bit bigger, right?
What?
Because you've just retired, you've got free time, hobbies that you didn't have the time to do before, you all of a sudden do. You can go and spend time on the golf course or doing X, Y, and Z. You've got more time to go and travel the world and do the things that you would ultimately want to do, the things that you, funnily enough, have just put on your bucket list and been working towards for the last however many years.
Yeah, we're going to get onto that in a minute with some brilliant examples, actually.
Yeah. So that's one tap. But then obviously life goes on a little bit, you get a bit older. You don't necessarily have the ability to do the things that you once did. Therefore, that tap gets a little bit smaller, and the amount of money that's coming out of that freedom fund, the pots that we've got, gets smaller.
Yeah, but what about this?
One-offs.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you might have grandkids getting married or
Yeah.
university fees or something like that. Real important one here, long-term care.
What is long-term care? What's that one?
Well, people are living longer, aren't they? But they're not necessarily living in better health.
Hmm.
So you have to look at this and go, if you're not in good health, what support and help are you going to need?
Hmm.
And how much is that going to cost? Because
Mm.
nothing is free these days, or anything quality is not really free.
Hmm.
You could go and be in a normal kind of care home that's funded by the state, but are you really going to be getting the quality care that you are obviously going to want at that point in your life? The chances are maybe not.
Mm.
But to get good quality care is going to cost a heap of money. So where's that being funded from? Well, funnily enough, this is part of the reason the Freedom Fund is there for you as well. Whilst it's a big tap, it might sound quite morbid to say it, it's not often on for very long.
Oh, you're cheery, Harry. Thanks for that, mate.
But it is the truth. It is the truth. But it's something that absolutely, absolutely has to be considered and looked at because it is becoming so much more prevalent and so much more important. People are living longer, not necessarily in better health. And would you want to be comfortable in the last years of your life? I know that I certainly would want to be.
Yeah. It's one of those things that the kind of care packages that the local authority used to be able to provide, with, I'm not being political when I say this, it's just the demographics that we've got in the Western world, is that you've got an inverted triangle. You've got too many people at the top end of the triangle, and too few people at the bottom. So the people at the bottom are the young people paying into the taxation system, and the people at the top are the elderly people who are drawing on the burden of the state, as it were. And we can see that in the cost that it now takes to kind of run the NHS and local authority. But it's important that you have got that there as a comfort blanket. And I've known clients where they've had to pay of the ilk of anything between £3,000 and £6,000 a week
Mhm.
for nursing home care. I could not believe it. When one of my clients was paying that sum of money, but they're having, almost like 24/7 nursing care, and of course, you get that sort of care it costs. But anyway, let's move on to sort of things like the bucket list, and things why people do these things. So these are clients that I've worked with over the years. Kay and John, they first were introduced to me by, ironically enough, somebody who was their ex next door neighbor who was a manager in a wealth management company. And of all the advisors or planners that he knew, he actually introduced them to me. And when I first sat down with Kay and John, I said, "So why am I sat here? What's on your mind? What's bugging you?" As we do, we're all ears and one mouth. We two ears, one mouth. So we try and use it in that proportion in the first couple of meetings, don't we, Harry? In terms of like really understanding with crystal clear clarity exactly what it is that's on someone's mind. And Kay and John told me their story, which was essentially in the preceding 18 months or so, they'd both lost both sets of parents. They'd both been diagnosed with cancer and were having treatment or had treatment for it. And there was all sorts of life events going along. So they said, we hear, Carl, that you're really good at running this kind of life planning sort of system, and we need to make sure that we kind of do it. So here we are. This is one of the things that they ticked off their bucket list, which was being on board the Queen Mary 2, which I live on the south coast of Devon. And during COVID, I had great pleasure in her being actually sort of just off the coast from where we are now. Absolutely staggering ocean liner. Brilliant. But then they also wanted to go and do things like, scuba diving in the Red Sea and NASCAR racing and all sorts of things. And that's what it's all about. It's money is an energy,
Hmm.
allows us to do stuff, good or bad. It's there to kind of help us to do all the things that we want to do. And it was a real joy to be part of the planning process for Kay and John and help them sort of facilitate that. So if we were to put all this together, go for it, Harry.
Idiot Save Aimlessly, if we can remember that far back, it's about starting with the end in mind,
Yeah.
building that bucket list, knowing what we're aiming for, and then we can start to think about how the finances get bought into this, knowing your magic number. So, what is it that needs to be bought in to facilitate that lifestyle? How big does the Freedom Fund need to be to provide that? Not forgetting that short-term bucket, it probably is the most important one of them all. And then putting those
Can I
two,
interject? So you
yeah,
just made a statement there. It's probably
yeah,
the most important one of them all. Why
yeah.
would you say that? Because why is not the freedom from the most important one of them all?
I think it allows you to make more sensible or sound decisions when it comes to life
Right.
and just money full stop.
So if you've got that kind of comfort blanket in place, then you can start to make more strategic decisions with the other money that you've got available. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. Imagine if you had £0 in your bank account and you wanted to save £1 million for your retirement
Yeah.
and you're getting paid. I don't think I would make the most sensible decisions with that money. I'd be too worried about what's going on right now to even focus about what's going on in the future. So it's about taking care of kind of current Harry
Yeah.
so that he can look after future Harry.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then
Number
putting
three.
the secret number one and secret number two kind of then comes together for that guilt-free spending,
Yeah.
knowing where the money's going to go, but knowing with crystal clear clarity and 100% certainty that that money is there to be enjoyed. Last thing you want to be doing is going away, treating the family, taking them on holiday, paying for meals, X, Y, and Z. But on the other hand, choosing the cheapest thing on the menu because you're worried you might not have enough to be able to do it. It's about guilt-free spending. You work hard all your life. You want to go out and enjoy yourself, which is their key point number three: live a life of no regrets.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Absolutely, bob on. Um, I guess for people wanting to kind of know more, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So these books are available on Amazon. My recommendation to you would be to buy the Money Mind Meaning one because it contains most of the information that's in the Dream It Planet Live It book. But then with the Money Mind Meaning, you get the whole kind of psychological, behavioral science. It's probably one of the most things I'm proud of that I've done in my career. And it's not written by AI or anything, it's blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this over the years. And they're tried and tested techniques that we've used and still continue to use with clients who are on their financial life planning journey. Harry, how else can people sort of really connect with you and take it to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got the Dream It Planet Live It website, which has got more resources on there, a link to all of our social media. It's got a book link as well, so you can go and find the books really nice and easy. Contact us through there. You've already mentioned it earlier, but I reiterate again, the podcast is out there with useful kind of tips and topics that people want to hear about and for us to deep dive into, which we have done. That's on Spotify, all the usual streaming services. So there's plenty out there for people to be looking at.
Yeah, I think just in closing there, I always say I run a little mini mastermind group, as you know, Harry. And one of the things I talk to the team about is that in moments of insight, take massive action, because massive action equals massive results. You know, if you're an airline pilot and you're on the end of the runway, and I can remember a guy I used to work with. He used to be in the RAF and he was a navigator in jet aircraft. And he said, I can remember being on this runway and there was ice and all sorts of terrible. And he said, I was just so confident that the pilot was going to push those sort of thrusters through, and we're going to be on 100% throttle. He said, because at the end of the day, no aircraft gets airborne on 50% throttle. And so it is with your financial life plan. It's the little things that make a big difference. It's the little things that make a big difference. But it's that inch by inch, it's a cinch, yard by yard. It's really hard. But in the moments of insight, so if you've heard something here, or you've seen something here, or you feel a connection, then please reach out to Harry. He'll help you to kind of ultimately dream, plan, and live the exact life that you want without worrying about money. So once again, son, thanks very much for your time, and I'll catch you in a bit. Bye for now.